Hello. I previously gave you some information, an informative speech on DACA and what a permanent repeal of DACA, how the impact might look. We took a look at both sides of that particular issue. Today, I'd like to look at the issue again in respects to my opinion on what that permanent repeal will look like. The purpose of this speech is to persuade you to understand that the permanent repeal of DACA would, in fact, have more harm than it would have any positive impact. First, I'd like to again visit why DACA, again, which is defined as deferred action for childhood arrivals, why it even exists. During the Obama administration, one of the things that he promised while he was running for office is that he would take a closer look at our immigration policies. He wanted to ensure that we could do some reform, at the same time provide a path for legal citizenship for people that had entered the country at an age in which they didn't really have, for lack of a better word, an option. I mean, you were young to the point where you couldn't say no. You didn't have the right to do so. So now you're in the country and you're illegally here, but you didn't really have the right to consent to say yes or no. So this was designed in lieu of a bill that created a path for legal citizenship, but it also allowed for you to have a right to stay in the country until something was done. Of course, the guidelines were very stringent. We talked about them. You had to be born at a certain age. You had to have no felony convictions. This wasn't something that covered everybody that came here. There were a select few. So now that we've taken a look at that again, I mean, we can understand why that purpose was there. It was really there to ensure that people that were in this country that were being productive members of society, had either a high school diploma, a GED, had served honorably in the United States military, had a pathway to become citizens, and were not scrutinized based on the fact that they had entered the country illegally. We also talked about earlier in the informative speech on an expert opinion on how a permanent repeal of DACA would negatively impact the United States. Raul Hinojosa Ojeda, who happens to be a expert on Mexican American immigration studies from UCLA, stated that it is estimated that people that would be recipients of DACA are expected to produce over $3.6 trillion worth of economic growth in the United States over the next 40 years. Okay, so that might not seem like a lot, but you take away that, and that impacts our economy's ability to grow, which is something we all want to see happen in this country. The next thing is that if we decided all of a sudden we're going to repeal this action, DACA, deferred action, basically stopping deportation for people that got into this country, they were here illegally, no doubt. I understand that. But that got into this country through no means of them having a right to consent. That would be cruel. Aya Simone. I read an opinion article she wrote that That type of action would be and would cause more harm than any savings in what opponents of keeping DACA believe. It would cause more harm than savings, and as far as they say that, okay, it costs millions of dollars to sponsor DACA recipients. No, it would cause more harm in the sense of, here you are taking someone that's been in the country for so long, where that's all they know, that's the only language they speak, and their native country, their language they don't know because they've never been there. It also goes against the very fabric of which this country was built. So, in closing, what I would like to say is that you should now be able to clearly see that DACA was enacted to protect those that were brought to this country illegally by no wanting of their own, for lack of a better word. It was not something that they didn't have a choice, by no choice of their own. It is a path for them to eventually become citizens. We also see that their potential impact to the economy over the next 40 years would ensure economic growth. Without that, we could definitely see that growth would not exist. And lastly, ignoring or repealing DACA is just downright cruel, and it's not what the United States is all about. So I hope you now see how the repeal of DACA, the permanent repeal of DACA, which we now see that there's been some legislation that might make it seem like, hey, my point is going to be correct. I believe that at the end of the day, it's going to be something that continues to happen. But if it did not, that impact would cause far more harm than it would good, and any argument on the other side could ever imagine.